All right, guys. God, this is like the fourth take I've done of this. I keep I'll be like in the middle of saying something and then I'll have to stop. So I'm going to try to just do this one all the way through. I'm not going to do monologue tonight because I keep finding that that's just taken away from my time that I can just sit down and actually get a story out. The last few days I've been having like trouble doing it. Like not even, it has nothing to do with like not having the material to talk about, or it's been, first I had the fatigue shit going on, and then I had the cavity, and like I sat down the other night, passed out in the middle of doing one. Last night I did a monologue. I was like, I'm gonna do a story right now. I tried to do one, and then my cavity was hurting, and then I did one at like 4 a.m, but I was so tired after that I passed out after it was like done uploading, so I couldn't copy and paste the link onto Patreon. I woke up at 11. I was like, fuck. Nico's just looking at me. Karina's like, it's really irresponsible of you as a parent. Don't say that to him. I was like, oh, okay. But I woke up mad. And, that's always been my deal as a person. I've always been the kind of guy that tries to do like 100 things at once, and like hopefully like one of them works out. I know that's not a good way to work, and I don't have to live like that. If I had more of a structure, I'd be able to do more with my day. There's so much time in my day that I fucking waste, or that I don't manage correctly. It's not like I'm having some illustrious lifestyle out here, like eating squid with Egypt princes. I was like, dude, the squid's fucking bomb. He's like, I'm already knowing. Already knowing. It's not like I'm doing shit like that. It's just more, I mismanage my time. I don't know. I'll go down some rabbit hole on social media or something, and I need to stop doing that shit. Another thing is with my time management stuff. So like right now I got the documentary, really time consuming because I'm wearing so many hats with it. Producer, director, writer, subject, train wreck. I'm Ryan, I'm a train wreck. They're like, hey Ryan. It's fine. I mean, it can be overwhelming. If I had like some big budget, like a documentary that gets funded by like a big time production company, then I would have a team of people helping me do this. And I do have a team to some degree, but at the end of the day, it is guerrilla filmmaking. And so it takes forever and it takes a lot of work, and I have to do every little thing myself. It's basically me and the editor, and then Jim Olds kind of overseeing things and giving us suggestions and writing various parts of the voiceover. But it takes up a lot of time, and it's the kind of thing where I was thinking about today. I'm like, okay, like you can really see it with the cuts that I've been putting up. You can see that it's really shaping into a film, right? And the first part of the documentary, the first third of it or so, looks like conventional documentary, but the more that my life gets junkied out, the more that's reflected in stylistically with the film. So it gets kind of, more artsy and shit as I turn into more of a scumbag. I'm such a scumbag, let's dance. Oh man, that's artsy. I don't know. That's, so that's taking up a lot of time, and then just being a dad and then trying to juggle all this. And one of the problems with not having good time management is that one thing goes wrong in my life. Like I'm like balancing this shit like a circus clown, like on a little unicycle. I'm just like, one little thing gets off balance and it fucks me up. My mom gets sick. My dad has a stroke. I get a cavity. I get butt fucked by a mime. He's like, I don't even talk. I don't even know how this is happening. I'm like, I don't know. Stop talking. And then he just goes back to doing, okay, I'm going to stop with shit like that. That's why I do monologues, though. That's why we always say that. One little thing goes off, and, it just kind of fucks up my whole mojo, Tomorrow, so I need to learn, just to finish that point, I need to learn how to just have a structure to my day. Much easier said than done, but at least I'm aware that that's something that's not working the best that it could be in my life, and I want to move forward. And that's all it's about, is, you know, progress, not perfection. Not to be a AA guy, but that's an AA term. It's progress over perfection, and I certainly believe that that's true. Tomorrow I wake up and I got to do my interview with 23andMe. I'm excited about that. I know a lot of you guys like his show. Then I'm going to Sinister's. We're going to send out all the raffle stuff. We're going to send out the sponsor gifts for the $100 tier. Palabra cash, if you're $20 tier below that, that's through Joe, but the sponsor stuff I'm sending personally tomorrow with Sinister. Also, anything that you guys had won in the raffle a couple weeks back. So that's happening tomorrow, and I want to get my sponsor calls and everything out of the way, and then I want to plan my trip to go see Danny in Wisconsin, and I want to do the other raffle to figure out the next place that I'm going to go. And this is all shit that I have to like juggle in the next couple days, but we'll get it done. Sorry for the long introduction, but I figure that if I do my monologue before the story, then the story actually gets done. See how I did that? I didn't blow my nose. Sorry. I snorted a lot of shit throughout my life. So what? Ugh. All right. I still never shaved those two little spots, by the way. Ugh. All right, so let's get into the story. So we're in juvenile delinquency, and where we're at now, real quick, I saw a comment where one of my supporters that's on Patreon was saying, you know, basically that I was talking shit about truckers. I'm just saying that, you know, as a joke. I say the same thing about heroin addicts or convicts, and I was both of them. I don't look at all truckers as trashy. I know that truckers make a shitload of money, and it's a respectable job, and there's lots of crystal meth in that industry. I'm not saying that everybody's on there. I'm not saying that it's a trashy industry altogether. Obviously, like anything, there's good and bad truckers. There's not good and bad truckers in everything, but in the trucking industry there is. So just want to say that. Sometimes I'm just joking, and I hope that people don't get offended by my stuff. So I'm sorry about that. So where we're at, basically I'd hit my dad, go down to, I got put into an orphanage called Noah's Anchorage. Saw this girl there that I thought was beautiful. That was the first night I was there. I went to school because, you know, I was still in high school at the time. And I end up going down to LA for a reason that I cannot remember. I think it was a rave. With Kelly, Papias, Orlando, and we met my friend Brian down there. Now, on the way down there, before we had left, Kelly had thrown a rock and shattered the back window of his Porsche. This guy had chased us into the backyard. She sprayed him with the hose. And we ran away. We stole his car. I mean, we ran away. We stole the guy's car. Which, I mean, honestly, like if I did that today, I would probably be like, oh, I'd be freaking out. But we still had that naivety back then where we're just like, oh yeah, that's normal. Fuck it. Let's do this all the time, you know? And so we end up going down to LA, not in the stolen Porsche. We end up going in Orlando's Volvo station wagon. Remember, I film Poppy as fucking Kelly in the back. Always something that sticks out in my mind, even though I censor it now when I look back because she was underage. In the memory, she's wearing a bikini. What? I don't know. Sounded good until I said it out loud. And then we get down there and we met up with my friend Clyde, who was a tweaker. I mean, the guy was a tweaker before he was a tweaker. But we'd literally be at this place down in Utah, the Aspen Ranch, place for troubled adolescents. He'd be like, what do you want to do when you grow up? I'm like, nothing. Just bang chicks. He's like, you know what I want to do? I'm like, what? He's like, I want to do meth. I was like, what? He's like, yeah. I don't know. I heard it's cool. I was like, damn, that sounds cool. He's like, I'm going to do meth and I'm going to be a trucker. I was like, all right, sounds cool. Now, I end up meeting up with him. So that's when I was 15 is when I met him. I was at Aspen Ranch the first time. From when I was 15 to 16, he was like one of the OG guys. He was like one of the like core group of people in there. I ended up getting out, and I met up with various people that I've met at this place throughout the time. He was one of them, and we ended up going and meet up with him. I think we're in like North Hollywood or something down there at this hotel that was like monthly, weekly place. And he's with these like older tweaker guys. I don't know. They're like, they seem a lot older looking back. They're probably like in their mid-20s, but you know how tweakers are. Tweakers that are 19 look like they're in their 40s. You know what I mean? Meth ages you like no other. And they're kind of being pervy to Kelly. It's pissing off Poppius. Him and I get in an argument, and Brian ends up going in the hotel room or the bathroom with Clyde. Kind of disappears in there. Now, I've already told you, spoiler alert, that I found out later that Brian became a gay. Not even just like, oh, you fuck guys, that's cool. I'd vote for you guys to have marriage equality. I'm nothing against that. He's not even like that. He's like, so girl, let's knock out sailors and suck them off. Like, dude, I'm not gay. Oh, so what? Fuck you. Suck your dick. You know, and you're like, he's one of those guys that makes you uncomfortable. I actually don't know him now. I'm just going off pictures I see on Facebook. He has like his normal, like his Facebook profile pictures. He's like in bondage gear getting like butt fucked by like a Nerf gun. And you're like, oh, he turned out fine. I wonder what Clyde's doing right now. I wonder if he's doing the same shit. But anyway, the point is he had disappeared in this bathroom, and I don't know what we thought. We thought it was odd because we had knocked on the door. They didn't answer. And then for the course of the next few hours, they didn't answer the door. And we had gone out to the parking lot. We look up in the window. We see what we believe to be Brian naked, kind of just through the window from what we could see. In the faint illumination, that's what it looked like to us, at least. And then Kelsey goes in the hotel, like lobby area, and she's trying to sweet talk the person that's working at the lobby into giving us access into this room. And then she comes out spooked. She's like, we gotta go. She won't tell us why. And her and Poppy end up getting in this fight about it, right? It becomes this whole thing. We end up leaving. We end up going to Spange some stuff at the gas station. I realize that this is repetitive. I will timestamp this one on Patreon to tell you when the story starts. This is basically a reiteration of what happened before. That's more for me than for you, just so that like I can get back in the flow of like where we're at chronologically. So you got to remember, you know, with all that being said, with the stuff that the recap stuff, police were looking for Poppius. You know, they were looking for him. They were looking for Kelly. Basically, they put two and two together because his Mustang was parked in front of this house. And then they asked this guy's dad, and they were looking to question them for Grand Theft Auto and for assault. Those are pretty serious charges. Now, at that time, I'd hit my dad. Although I was not charged with hitting my dad, I went to this orphanage, and basically my parents gave them like a custody split. I think they gave them like 60% custody over me, and my parents still retained 40%. And that's very common when you're like a juvenile delinquent. When I was going to those schools for troubled adolescents in Idaho and Utah, that was a very common thing. They would get 60% custody over you, and that way they could like touch you, not sexually. That way they could restrain you. I think that's like a weird state regulation law that the program has to have slightly more custody over you percentage wise than your family, and that way they can physically restrain you if you're butt fucking. If you're like, dude, you still have your yeets? I'm trying to take that. What's up, homeboy? Oh yeah, this feels good. And like, hey, no yeets taken. And they like try to take the guy off the other guy. They're legally allowed to touch you because they have more custody percentage points or whatever. I don't know. It sounds weird. Points. Like a fucking football spread. No, I'll take Ryan over under 60. Think he'll butt fuck by then. I don't know. No. Can't say funny shit every time, guys. You know, sometimes I know too. I've been doing that a lot lately too. I've been saying like really stupid shit, and Karina's just like, man, you're losing it, buddy. Like when I'm just talking to her, you know, she'll be like, hey, do you want to have sex? I'll be like, you want to fuck your face? She'll be like, what? I'm like, I don't know. It's not funny. She's like, no, you're stupid. You're a bitch. We're not having sex now. I'm like, okay. So we end up spanging. We get some money and we leave this parking lot. We're heading home. We have nowhere else to go. We have no idea what happened to Brian. We know that trouble's waiting for us back in Santa Barbara. It's our only option. We're kids. We're like in the San Fernando Valley. It's like porn stars walking around like having lollipops in their mouth and shit. It was just, you know, San Fernando Valley's weird for kids. We end up getting pulled over. And they run Orlando's license and registration. We think that he's good. I mean, he's driving the car. They're not looking for him. They're looking for Poppius and Kelly and myself. And he ends up getting arrested. Now, of course, when he gets arrested, we start freaking the fuck out because we're all wanted, in a sense, for a lot more serious stuff than what he. We don't even know why he got arrested. I don't know, DUI. So we're terrified in the car, and they end up, one of the cops had a flashlight on us the whole time, and it was a female cop, and she ends up pulling Kelly out of she was in the passenger seat. She might have been in the back seat, actually. I think I was in the front seat. She was in the back window seat. That's right. I was in the passenger seat. She was in the back passenger seat. Anyway, it doesn't really matter. She ends up pulling Kelly out, and she cuffs her. So now it's just Poppius and I, and we're like looking at each other. I'm like, let's kiss. He's like, what? I'm like, I don't know. We're going to jail. Fuck it. And we're kind of sitting there for a second. We're watching in horror as Orlando's getting put in the back of a squad car. And then they go and put Kelly in the back of the other squad car. So we already know what time it is. And, all right, come on, guys. Out of the car. And I'm like, can I ask what we're being detained for? And they're like, shut up. You have no rights. Bitch. And I'm like, all right. I don't know if they said that exactly, but it was something to that effect. So they end up cuffing me. They end up cuffing Poppius, and they take us away from each other. I end up going in the back of the car with Orlando, and I think they put Poppius, I don't know if, I want to say they didn't put him in the back of the car with Kelly, but I know that I was in the back of the car with Orlando, and it doesn't really matter. We had no idea why they were detaining us. You know, we just basically got arrested, and when stuff like that happens, it happens in a flash. What I do know is that Orlando and I were talking to each other in the back of the cop car. Now, you know, I'm cuffed, he's cuffed, and I'm asking him what he got arrested for. And he's like, I don't know. What'd you get arrested for? I was like, I don't know. And we're like trying to talk to the cops. Like, shut up. So we were like, oh, we were freaked out, right? So we just sitting in this car in silence. And I remember like looking out the window and just watching LA kind of scroll by, you know, the San Fernando Valley. And I remember thinking to myself that I was probably pretty fucked, you know? I mean, I was thinking I might be going to youth prison or something. If you took all of the stuff that we had been in trouble for and you add it together, we were looking at pretty significant time, I guess, as juveniles. I mean, of course, they're not as strict with you when you're under 18, but when you're 17, it's like you're close enough, if you know what I mean, so they break you off. So the whole car ride's in silence. We end up getting to this, I guess, a police station. Not really sure. It's like a substation. I guess that's what you would call it because they had bars and everything there. And not bars like where you have martinis, bars like fucking cells. And that was the last time that I saw him. They separated us and they put us in like these, you know, these single person cells, no phone, no nothing. And I remember there was like a concrete slab, you know. Now, you got to remember, I had never been to juvenile hall. I had never been to jail at this point. This was a completely new experience for me. This is actually the first time that I was ever in a cell. And I remember thinking that it was cool as fuck. I was like, man, I don't even care. This shit's badass. I feel like I'm in a fucking Eminem video or something. I was like, I'm just gonna sit here. Fuck it, I'm an outlaw. So what? And then like an hour went by and I was like, oh my God, I'm gonna be in here forever, you know? I mean, that's just how it is when you're a kid. You think it's cool when you first get arrested. I remember that. And like another hour goes by. Absolutely nothing. No cop comes and talks to me. I'm just sitting in the cell. Eventually, they end up bringing a little Hispanic kid in. You know, he's like a wannabe Southsider. He's wearing like a FUBU jersey or something. And they bring him in and he's like mad dogging him. You know, he's like, I noticed that when you get in trouble when you're a kid, people like always like exaggerate or like act the part, but it's like kind of corny in a way. And he's like, he looks ridiculous. He looks like he's taking a shit. I'm like, are you all right? He's like, yeah, man. No, he didn't talk. He talked more like an essay. I was like, hey, where are we? He's like, hey, dog, you don't know where we are? We're in fucking prison right now. This is fucking state prison. Now, I knew that I was not in state prison. I'm like, pretty sure that you don't go straight to prison. I think that you like have to go to court and then you go to jail and then you go to prison. He's like, nah, dog, my fucking cousins are in prison. They told me that it was like this. They said that you get arrested and then you go to prison. You're fucking stupid, kinda. And I was like, oh God, what are these guys? It was like my first time being in a cell with some very stupid fucking Southsider. It was not the last time that I was with someone like that. And like, you know, I talk a lot of shit about Southsiders. It's with love. I have a lot that I'm friends with. I don't want you to think that I am anti-Southsider. I mean, some people that I've been friends with for many, many years that I met in prison are Southsiders. So I'm just joking. But he had this little attitude with me, you know. He was trying to tell me that we were in prison. You know those people? Yeah, fool, I stabbed my sister 19 times with a butcher knife. Now she's dead. I don't care. They'll probably put me on probation, fool. I don't even give a fuck. I listen to fucking rap. I'm like, all right. I don't remember what the guy was saying to me specifically, but it was dumb shit like that. You know, he's like, hey, I'm in a fucking gang. I was like, yeah? He's like, yeah. I don't want to talk to you anymore because you're not in a gang. I was like, how do you know I'm not in a gang? He's like, because you're fucking white and I don't like you. That was probably the extent of our conversation. Something to that effect. This is a single person cell too, by the way. And I'm just kind of, at this point I was cold. I remember being very cold. I didn't even know what city I was in. I knew that I was in the outskirts of LA. I was somewhere in the San Fernando Valley. I had no idea why I was being detained. I had no opportunity to talk to Orlando or talk to Papias or talk to Kelly about this. I just knew that I was somewhere close to the hotel, probably like within a 15-mile radius. So I was somewhere in the valley. We brought heroin down there, and before we got arrested, I put it. I didn't put it up my ass. I put it in the tongue of my shoe. You know, back then they made skateboard shoes that would have like a little secret compartment in there, in the tongue. Chad Muska shoes. They had them in the old S shoes, but that's not what these were. These were Circas with like a little zipper. They were amazing. You know, it's like where the tongue where your shoe would be, except there's this little like compartment where you can zip it and you can put shit in the tongue. And I can't tell you how many times that particular feature on that shoe saved my ass. This time I had a little bit of heroin in there, you know, because remember at this point I was strung out on heroin and coke. I definitely had heroin on me and it was definitely in my shoe. I knew that. So I remember I couldn't figure out how to do it. I'd never stirred it up in water and put it in my nose or anything. I just knew that I was going to be getting sick, you know. Back then when you're younger too, like when your system's newer to heroin addiction, it feels like you're not doing dope like every like 2 hours, you know. It's like every 8 hours, you're taking a little rip and then you stay high. But I remember sitting in the cell being cold. It was a single person cell, but there was two of us. There was like this little essay dude that was faking the funk. And I remember I started feeling kind of sick and I was cold and I was scared because I didn't know what was going to happen to me. Eventually, I couldn't really figure out what to do with the heroin, so I just broke off like a little, like I remember pretending like I was taking a shit, sitting on the toilet and like breaking off a little chip with my fingernail, little piece of black tar heroin. And I remember just putting it in my mouth, you know, and I put it like it was like chewing tobacco or something, so that, you know, my whole theory was that it was going to like seep into my lip and that I would feel it. And I actually did, you know, I mean, back then I was doing such small amounts of it, you know, I probably at that point I was doing about a half gram a day or so. So it didn't take much for me to start feeling better. I was there all night. You know, I didn't talk to a cop, didn't talk to anyone. That little kid that was in there, little Southsider kid, he left eventually. And this place that I was being detained, like I said, I guess it was just a substation. The particular like row of cells that I was being housed in, it didn't have any window to the outside. There was no place where you could look at a clock, so I had no idea what time it was. All I know is that it was probably 5 or 6, maybe 7 hours later before a cop came and talked to me. And remember how things had left off in the last video. Kelly had gone into this lobby and she was spooked by something. Brian had disappeared, so there was some weird stuff going on. And then of course there was all the baggage from Santa Barbara. And that's kind of one of the reasons that I reiterated or recapped all that stuff before the story started, because it's a lot of different details that you guys need to remember moving forward with the story. But a cop eventually comes and takes me out of there. Now he brings me into, I guess, like an office area. It's not like an interrogation room like you'd see in the movies. It was like an actual desk with like a computer. It was like being in the principal's office. I remember it reminded me of that. And he sits me down and he's like, hey, do you want any coffee? Of course I wanted coffee. You know, I was exhausted. This whole fucking ordeal was very draining on me. And so he pours me a cup of coffee in a styrofoam cup. Then he asks me, he's like, hey, do you know why you're being detained right now? Now back then, you know, nowadays if a cop was asking me that, I'd either say that I couldn't talk to him without an attorney, or I'd just start making up complete bullshit. That's what I did on the Pimping and Pandering. I just made up all this bullshit, trying to buy myself time so that he wouldn't notify my PO. But back then, I wasn't even capable of having an amicable conversation with the cop. I had an attitude. I was like, I don't need to tell you anything. I'm a minor. He was like, okay. Do you like being in jail? And I was like, is that where I am in jail? He's like, just answer the question. Do you like being in jail? I said, I mean, no. Do you like being a fat cop, you stupid pig? You know, I said something to that effect. I don't know. I don't really remember. What I do know is that I probably talked to this guy for no longer than 60 seconds, 1 minute, before he was taking me back to my cell. You know, it was like I talked shit to him so much that we couldn't even have a conversation. And he didn't tell me why I was there. You know, I didn't even get to finish my cup of coffee, the cup of shitty ass coffee that this guy had made for me. So now I'm back in my cell and it's cold in there. And I still don't know what time it was. I know that judging by his office and the light that was coming from the window, it was probably 8 in the morning, something like that. By the time we left the hotel, it was pretty late. And so he takes me back to the cell, and now I'm just kind of sitting there mad at myself for not just complying and not being so confrontational with him, so at least I could get a little insight as to what the fuck was going on. So I ended up staying in the cell now for quite some time. And I knew nothing about being in trouble. I didn't know that my parents had already been notified because I was a minor. I didn't really know what the situation was. All I know is that I was freaked out by the whole thing. Eventually, they come and they get me. This time it's a different cop. He brings me into his office. Same area as before, different office. And same thing, he asked me if I want a cup of coffee. I say yes. I start drinking a cup of coffee. He asks me the same questions. Do you know why you're here? And I say, I don't know why I'm here. I would like to know why I'm here. I miss my family. I want to go home. He's like, where are you from? I said, Santa Barbara. He goes, okay. The reason that we detained you guys is because your friend stole a car. Do you know what I'm talking about? Now, I knew better than to fucking admit that. I was like, a car? I was like, nah. No, man, I just like to party. He's like, I bet you do. I was like, I do. He's like, well, your friend stole a car. Actually, two of your friends stole a car. Girl and a guy. We can't figure out who it was out of your group. All we know is that all of your families are very concerned about it. And they put out like a APB looking for us. Like we were in some sort of danger. I guess our parents had gotten together and like talked about the fact that we were out of control and that, you know, something bad was going to happen to us because we were on some crime spree, is how this guy was explaining it to me. He actually used that term. He's like, well, your families got together and they are claiming that you guys are on some sort of crime spree. So tell us what's going on. Are you on acid? I started laughing. I was like, am I on acid? No. He's like, so were you the one that stole the car? I say, honestly, I have no idea what you're talking about. He goes, is that your girlfriend? The blonde? I said, no. And he's like, well, whose girlfriend is that? And I was like, I'm not really sure. I was like, he's like, so what were you guys doing down here tonight? I told him that we were just going to a party. I was like, we're going to some house party. We had friends that live down here. We're just going to a party. And he's like, did you guys do any drugs? I say, no. He goes, okay. All right. Well, that's all I need from you. I'm like, okay. Still don't know what's going on. I do know that this has to do with the car that was being stolen. So it had nothing to do with the hotel that we were at. It had nothing to do with Brian or Clyde. But still, I guess I was starting to panic a little bit. I think also because I think I was out of dope too at that point. I think that little bit that I put in my tongue or like in my lip was the last of what I had. You got to remember, this was like 18 years ago now. So this was a long time ago. So some of the details from it are a little cloudy. As I progress into the juvenile delinquency series, like I remember stuff a little more clearly. This particular night, we were doing crank earlier that day. And anytime I do meth, it really makes my memory less reliable. I like forget little things or whatever. But anyway, make a long story short, to get on to the more exciting part of this. After I had that conversation, I end up going back, to the little cell that I was in, little one-man cell that I was in with that Mexican guy. I'm still alone. That guy was only in there for a little part the first night that I was there. And they bring me back to that cell. About an hour later, they come and get me again, and this time they put me in the back of a squad car, And the guy that's driving the squad, it's just, regular LAPD. And they're telling me that they're going to drive me back to Santa Barbara, that my friends that I was with, their parents had come to get them. That's what they told me. It's not what was true. That's just what the cop told me because I'd asked. I was like, well, where's my friends? He's like, oh, their parents came to get them. And I was like, well, why did my parents come to get me? And he's like, well, because you're a fucking orphan. I'm like, I'm not an orphan. He's like, that's what your file says, that you live in an orphanage. I'm like, dude, I've been there like one day. He's like, so you're an orphan. I'm like, I'm not an orphan, dude. I have a family. He's like, but you live in an orphanage? That makes you an orphan. I was like, how does that make me a fucking orphan? He said, orphanage. You live at one, so that's what you are. I was like, okay, whatever, man. So he ends up bringing me back to Santa Barbara. This is LAPD. I guess, he said that these other people's parents had come to pick them up, but that ended up not being true. And he takes me all the way to Santa Barbara, and instead of going to the orphanage, he takes me to juvenile hall, And I thought that I was going to go get booked into there, but what ends up happening at juvenile hall is they bring me to, I don't know, like another office type place, and I end up talking to like a case manager, and they're having me do an intake form for home confinement. I didn't even know what that meant at the time. You know, I'm like so new to getting in trouble, I didn't even know what that meant. And it was like some black lady, and she was asking me all these questions about, you know, have you ever been butt fucked? I was like, no. Have you ever been verbally abused? I was like, no. She's like, have you ever been butt fucked? I'm like, just ask me that. She's like, I just got ass, sweetie. I was like, all right. So I do this whole intake process, and they end up giving me an ankle monitor. You know, this like little black box they put around my ankle. I'd never had one of those. Again, you know, now I'm starting to feel tough again. I'm an outlaw. You know, I had my little dyed black hair or whatever. So after I get on the ankle monitor, they bring me to the orphanage, and they explain to me when I get there, no longer with the cops. One of the people from juvenile hall ended up taking me there. Not the lady either. I forget who it was. It was like some guy. And so they take me back to the orphanage, and they explain to me that this is where I was living, that my parents want nothing to do with me, and I'm not in any trouble for what had happened with the car, with the alleged assault or whatever, that issue had been resolved. That was their exact wording. They're like, this issue's been resolved. You're to stay at this orphanage, and you're not allowed to leave the orphanage. And I was like, well, what am I going to do with school? And they're like, you're going to do homeschooling at the orphanage. You're going to do packet. So like, same kind of stuff that I was already doing when I was at that place in Utah for troubled adolescents. So I was like, okay, whatever. They basically wanted to keep me isolated in this orphanage because they deemed me, I guess, their favorite verbiage, you know, and they used this with me and with every other criminal throughout my entire life. I was a danger to the community. So I had to be contained at this orphanage. So I ended up going back there. And you got to think, like, I'm in this, I'm feeling like kind of perplexed by what transpired, what was going on. I had no idea what had happened to Poppius, what had happened to Orlando, what had happened to Kelly. I was pretty much in the dark about all that. When they told me that the issue had been resolved, I guess in my mind, I just put it together that they were charged with it. So I started freaking out about it. But I mean, I was in the clear, I guess. But still, I was worried for my friends. This was like my best friends, my core group of friends. So I remember getting to the orphanage and just being completely fatigued from everything that had happened. You know, I was probably coming off the crank or whatever. At this point, I was getting dope sick as well. And when you're dope sick, it can make you tired. It can go either way. It can make you very tired, or it can make you kind of electrified by withdrawal where you can't go to sleep. So I end up getting back to this place, and they bring me back to the same room that I was at before. I just want to go to sleep. You know, there's kids in this room. There's like orphans running around with teddy bears and shit. And I was like, too much. I'm like, this is too much. I'm going to sleep. So I ended up going to sleep that night. I wake up the next morning, and it was one of those things. This always happens. This happens when you go to jail. This happens when you're in a situation that's kind of hard for you to believe. I end up waking up kind of thinking that it had all been a bad dream. You know, that happens to me all the time in jail. And if you've been to jail, I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. When you first get arrested, it happens pretty frequently. You'll wake up and it'll feel like the arrest, everything that had happened after you'd been arrested in jail was all a dream, and that you were home and it was a bad dream, and you'd woken up from that dream. And then you wake up from the dream that you were dreaming that you weren't in jail to the reality that you are in fucking jail, and it's always the worst feeling in the world. It's like getting stabbed in the chest. I had that happen to me for the first time right there and then. I woke up and I could just feel this clunky thing on my ankle, and I'm just like, fuck, it's real. On top of that, I was dope sick. I remember just being covered in sweat, and I was in a predicament because I was being monitored very closely now. You know, the GPS that I had around my ankle, if I left the facility, they would be notified immediately, and they said that I'd go straight to juvenile hall. And I got a little taste of that, you know, when I was in this holding cell, or wherever the fuck I was down in LA, and I definitely didn't want to go back there, but I wanted to get dope. So I remember just feeling really odd at this place, dope sick, didn't really know my surroundings, coming to grips with the fact that I'm a fucking orphan. I didn't know if I was going to start like singing show tunes with all of them. And I felt bad for these kids too. I mean, these were legit orphans. I wasn't even like an orphan. My mom still like put Tommy Hilfiger cologne like in my Christmas stocking and shit. I didn't feel like an orphan, but I was now. I remember thinking about the girl that I had seen that first night that I'd been at the orphanage. Now, this may seem like a lot of time has gone by. This is like, I'd just seen her like a couple nights before. This all happened within like a 2-night period. And I remember thinking about her and I was like, wow, it'd be nice to just have some affection. I wasn't even like craving sex or anything. I just wanted to like cuddle up. I just wanted to feel better. It felt like a girl could do that to me. And that was like the thing that got me through, like got me up. I ended up going to the shower, probably beat off and thought about her. Thought about cuddling. I was like, oh fuck, this cuddling's hot. And just nutted all over the shower. I'm sorry. Sorry for family members that watch this. So I took a hot shower and I ended up just laying down on my bed and just going in and out of dope sick sleep, Remember doing that all day. All these other kids were at school and I get woken up to probably like a 10-year-old, right? This is much later in the day. Now I'm in full-blown withdrawal, covered in sweat. And it's like the kind of sweat that stinks that I'd get very used to. But this is all like when all this is new to me. I have no idea why I'm feeling that sick. Like it's not the kind of thing where like nowadays, as soon as I'm dope sick, I'm like, fuck, whose dick do I have to suck not to feel like this anymore? I know instantly that I'm in withdrawal. But back then I was so new to it all that I didn't really recognize the feeling as heroin withdrawal per se. I just knew that I felt horrible. And it was still the onset of it. I wasn't even in full-blown withdrawal. And as a heroin addict, you find that a lot. You run into that where you're like 8 hours, 10 hours into it. And you're like, I'm so sick. But you're not even that sick. You're not like full-blown, like sick until like 30, 40 hours into it. That's when you're like dying. That's when you're like, can I maybe get weed? We're like, weed? Fucking scam artist, you're not even a real heroin addict. You just want to suck our dicks. I'm like, bust it, So this kid's like, this 10-year-old's like, hey, it's dinner time. And I'm just like, I remember looking at him and I was like, stay in school, And the kid was like, and he like left. So I got up and I ended up going to dinner, which was always weird. I felt like I was reading like one of those like Madeline children books about the orphan child. Sit at this like long table. There were no nuns or anything, but it had that vibe. Everybody's like eating minestrone soup and I'm just sitting. I am so dope sick, right? And I'm like sitting. I remember I was wearing a long sleeve gray shirt and I'm just shivering and I'm just covered in this ammonia reeking, stench. Trying to eat the soup and like they're all talking about school and everything that happened, and it's like people are pretending that they're happy, but you could tell that it was like a very miserable experience for everybody. It's just like, yeah, school was fine, and they're like, fuck, I have no family, and just like dunk their head again. And I remember looking up and seeing the girl, and she had like these like weird braids. She looked like Princess Leia, like how Carrie Fisher looked in Return of the Jedi, like these weird braids. And I remember just like looking at her and I was so dope sick that I just didn't even give a fuck. I just like kind of looked at her and she looked at me and I just probably looked horrible. But I remember that we definitely like caught each other's gaze. And, you always want to like cling on to this false hope that like, well, I mean, maybe she'll make it all feel better. It's always like a reoccurring thing in my life, but certainly when you're dope sick, it's even more so that way. So that was like the second time I saw her. I end up going back up into my bed right after dinner. I just crawl into bed, put the comforter over myself, and I'm like shivering. I have no idea why I feel like this either. It feels like worse than the flu. I'm attributing it to definitely running out of the black tar heroin, but I had no idea how sick I truly was going to get. And I also was going through that mental panic part of it where I knew that I wasn't able to get any. What was I going to do? Run out the door with no money and no car? And, Santa Barbara's not the kind of place where you have areas where you can just score on the street easily. There's a couple, but I didn't even know about them back in that time. It was kind of complicated to get one. I'd have to drive to Goleta, which was like 25 minutes from where we were. So there was no way that I could get anything. And I end up, not sleeping that night. And that's when the sickness really kicked in. That's when I was tossing and turning. It felt like the bones were trying to burst out of their seams in my leg. Kind of felt like methadone, I guess, because it was my first time really being sick like that. It was probably a little more severe than it normally would be. And I was like tossing and turning, and it was like these cheap, spring mattress where every time I'd turn over, it would be like super loud, and it kept waking people up, and there was like 7-year-olds in there and shit. It's an orphanage. It's not like they grouped you with people your age. So I'm making all these noise and everything, and eventually somebody's like, "Hey man, I have 5th grade tomorrow. You think you can be quiet?" I'm like, "Fuck you!" And like the lights come on. Some kid, he was probably like 14 or something. He was a lot younger than me. He just jumps on top of me and puts his hands around my throat and starts like strangling me like Bart Simpson style. I was like, "What the fuck, man?" And I'm so weak, I can't even get this guy off of me. He's like, "Don't you talk like that to Garrett." And I was like, "I don't even know who Garrett is, man. Leave me alone. I'm sick." He's like, "Don't talk like that to Garrett." It was like the first time that I realized that I was with a bunch of like mentally unhinged kids, these little orphan kids. I'm like, oh my God, this fucking checks out. Dope sick for the first time, and I'm getting attacked by ravaged orphans, It made me feel really uncomfortable, and I was just like, fuck. And I like got up and I walked outside to the hallway. I was wearing like these pajamas that somehow I got on in the midst of being sick like this, and I was wearing the same gray long sleeve shirt that I was wearing at dinner. And I just like walked to, there's like a common living room area, and I just went and passed out on the couch. I got woken up by one of the night staff. They had a flashlight in my face. And they're like, "Hey man," it was a Jamaican dude. He's like, "Hey man, you can't sleep right there, man." And I'm like, I don't give a fuck, man. I got attacked by a rabid orphan, probably have rabies now and shit. He strangled me. He's like, "Were you sexually assaulted?" I was like, "No." "Well, if you weren't sexually assaulted, you need to go back to bed, And I was like, "Look, man, if I tell you that the guy tried to sexually assault me, can I not sleep in there?" He's like, "Yes, please tell me all about it." I was like, "All right." Guy out of the shower, 14-year-old, strangled me, tried to butt fuck me, and I'm scared. I don't want to go back in there. I'm not trying to get butt fucked, man. He's like, "Man, I'm so sorry. I'm going to wake up Dr. Turner, and he will come down here, and he is going to talk to you and make sure that you're okay from your sexual assault." Immediately, I knew that it was a fucking bad idea. I'm like, why did I do that? Now, Dr. Turner, whatever the fuck that is, sounds like some archaeologist. He's gonna like come down with a lantern and be like, "What, you butt fucked?" I'm like, "No, Dr. Turner, I just didn't want to sleep in there with a bunch of orphans. They're trying to beat me up because I'm coming off black tar heroin." So I'm just sitting in this living room, I just kind of thing that I just kind of said so the guy would leave me alone. He had told me if I said that some sort of sexual assault was happening or that it happened, that they'd leave me alone and that I wouldn't have to go back in that room. So that's why I'd said it. No idea what kind of shitstorm that was going to create. And on top of that, I had no idea what had gone on with Papias, Kelly, Orlando, Brian, and Clyde, all of that. And like all of that stuff's going to come all the, full 180. It all comes back to all that stuff. And we can get into that in the next installment of the Juvenile Delinquency series. My tooth was like really, really hurting. I hope that this video was good for you guys because it was really difficult for me to do, but I feel bad because I've been slacking and I'm trying to come correct with you guys because I'm a good guy like that. Palabra.